Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The manhwa starts with a boy named Rud, explaining how he's always been chasing after his brother's back, and when he finally felt like he caught up he was still out of reach. He always thought his brother was giving him half-hearted consideration, and he mentions how his colleagues would often tell him he has a temper, and mediocre skills, but is still conceited. And he always denied their words, but now he understands they were right, and that it's true. But now that his brother has died, he doesn't understand how he could hate his big brother in the first place. Rather than hating him, he admired him. And he wanted to stand on equal footing with him, but he died protecting him. We see Rud holding his brother's hand, saying how he keeps going ahead of him. And we learn that one of his arms and legs are gone, so he can't run away from the dragons. So he should try to bring a few with him to the other world. We see him yelling at the dragons, and a bright beam descends upon him, and we see that a man with horns and wings appears, which confuses Rud. Based on the man's aura, he's probably the king of the dragons, but all of his comrades are dead, and they've killed the dragon kings. But he can't feel anything from the man, almost like a mirage. The man asks Rud if he's the only one left, and it's troublesome everyone died. But Rud's instincts are telling him how dangerous the man is, and that he has to kill him. Rud grabs his sword while the man is speaking, and Rud realizes he only has one chance. He leaps toward the man and cuts his face, while the man says, "Let's wait a bit longer." Rud is stuck with ringing in his ears, and blinded by the light. And we see a weird distortion, and the next moment Rud is back at the academy he attended when he was younger. We see Rud wondering what is going on, and he remembers today is the day of the entrance ceremony. He wonders if it is a dream, but the feeling he has, and the memories are real. So he wonders if he regressed. And if he did, it had to have been an act of God, and he wonders if that man was really a dragon. And regardless, he's someone that he must kill, and this is a great opportunity to change things, so nobody will die. We see a girl yell out to him, asking if he is sick. She was one of his former comrades and he calls out to her. Her name is Heneth Harpulya. She asks how he knew her name, and he says she's a top entry, so of course, he knows her. He asked her why she thought he was sick, and she mentioned how she thought he had a mental illness. And how it's her first time seeing someone crazy. And he laughs while calling her rude. And he jokingly calls him a pervert who likes being cursed at. After the opening speech, she comments on how long it was, and stares at Rud. He responds, and she mentions she has patience because she is a magician. And asks for his name, and he tells her his name is Rud Donatos, and that he's from the outskirts. She says it's her first time hearing his family name, and where he's from, and is surprised he made it into the academy with such a background. She offers to teach him about the academy, and she explains that there are guild masters looking for talent, and explains who the guild masters are. Rud thinks about how he knows who they are, and how they'll die. She explains to Rud that she admires the White Flame Guild, and Rud explains how she eventually becomes the leader, but dies avenging her senior. Heneth gets called up to the stage for a speech, and Rud is ready, because the next person up is his brother Aesir, who is the student council president, and how talented he is. But when the student council president speaks, we learn that it is not his brother, but a man named Jeremy Duville. Which shocks Rud, because in his past life, his brother was the president, and Jeremy was his best friend. Rud approaches Jeremy asking about his brother, and Jeremy tells him it's his first time hearing the name Aesir. This makes him wonder where his brother is, and he thinks maybe his brother doesn't exist in this world. If that's true, either his brother's existence is gone, or he regressed and decided not to come here. And how the second idea would be better. Heneth asks him what he's thinking so hard about, and he tells her he's looking for someone, and asks if there's a good way to do so, and that he might be going to the academy. She recommends the library, and they head there. She opens the door for them, and she says she wanted to come here eventually. He asked how she knew where it was, and she says, it's normal for a student to memorize where the facilities are. She finds a book she wanted to read, and we see Rud looking through a student record book, and he doesn't see his brother's name in it. And he says he might not exist in this world because of the Void Dragon, and how he disappeared with his brother's body. So he might be alive in a different dimension. They head back to class, and their teacher Daniel Gold introduces himself as their combat teacher. And how they'll have to work hard, but if they actually work hard and have a little talent, it won't be impossible. Heneth sees Rud leaving and asks where he's going, and tells him the dormitory isn't in the direction he's going. And he tells her he knows, and she looks doubtful. We see him enter a training area, and he wonders if he still has his stamina, so he begins by doing pull-ups. But he realizes that he's trash, and how starting tomorrow will be combat class, and 1 week from now will be sparring class. And that he doesn't want to repeat his previous mistakes, so he'll do better this time. And he's already an expert in working hard. In the training area, he sees another one of his previous comrades, Balak Steros. We learn that later on, he will become the Fist King, but he never met him in the training area. He decides to ignore him, but throughout all of his exercises, Balak is just staring at him. Rudd asks him if he's trying to pick a fight, and Balak says he's misunderstood and he's just trying to copy his form. Because it's so perfect. And asks him if he's the god of workout. Rudd introduces himself, and so does Balak, and Balak tells him he'll follow Rudd's teachings for workouts. We see at the outdoor training ground, their teacher Daniel tells them to choose a weapon. We see Henneth wondering about what to choose, and Rudd suggests she uses a dagger, and explains some of the uses to her. And that in his past life, Henneth had a talent for the dagger in her past. She decides to go with the dagger, and asks if he's going to use his sword. And he'll tell her he doesn't know, and we'll see. Rudd asks Daniel if he can pick more than one weapon, and wonders if it's arrogance, or confidence, and tells him sure. We see, including the sword, he picks the spear, and a great sword. These 3 weapons he will use. Daniel recognizes his skill with the weapons and asks him what he did before he enrolled. And Rudd tells him he was a mercenary because he lost his family to a dragon. We see that Henneth tells Rudd he's quite good, and when he says he is, she jokingly calls him arrogant. And she asks if what he told the professor is true. He says yes, and she tells him that it must have been difficult and apologizes for reminding him. And he is surprised she knows how to feel sorry. And he looks at her while describing how she wasn't apathetic, but is interrupted by her asking him what he's looking at, and he changes his mind. We see the 2 of them watching a commotion. One of the teachers, named Claire, is yelling at Balak for not choosing a weapon, and he explains that his family doesn't use weapons. Henneth asks Rudd if he knows who he is, and he says he doesn't. But Balak approaches him and walks up to Rudd. And we see Daniel holding the other professor back while she yells at Balak. Daniel explains even though it's against his family's tradition, they are currently in a class, and if he keeps refusing to pick a weapon, he'll have to repeat a year, but this confused Rudd because previously, they just let it be, but now the past has changed. Rudd realizes that he can't fail here, and hands him some wrist guards and calls them weapons. We see Rudd, Henneth, and Balak walking down the hallway, and another group of students yell at them and insult them. Rudd was too absorbed in his paper and asked if they were talking to him, and after the other group insulting them some more, Rudd tells them that he could take them on barehanded. This angers one of the boys and he punches at Rudd, but Rudd dodges it, and trips him. Henneth makes a funny face at him, and the boy is embarrassed. He grabs his sword and unsheathes it, even though using weapons out of sparring is prohibited. He swings at Rudd, but Rudd uses a move he learned from Balak in his past life, and deflects the blade. And hits the boy in the head. Claire runs up and asks what's going on, and Balak and Henneth explain that it is self-defense. Claire is surprised he was able to disarm the boy with his bare hands, and tells the group to take the boy to the infirmary, and for Rudd to see her after classes. Henneth and Balak question Rudd on his unarmed techniques, and Rudd tells them he's a genius. This disgusts Henneth, but Balak is slow so he believes him. And Henneth says he's clearly hiding something, and Balak tells her not to dig into a friend's secrets. Rudd remembers his past life of all of them gathered together, and resolves himself further to not let anyone die. We see Rudd leaving Claire's office, and that she was expecting him to be rude, and to be prone to violence, but that he's actually really nice, and a caring friend. We see Daniel walk in and remind her that the other teachers will be meeting in her office. We are then introduced to 2 more teachers, Arthur Winston, and Damian Grace. Daniel tells everyone that the students this year are on a higher level than last year, and Arthur asks if there are any students they should keep his eyes on. Damian says all of his students are excellent, and Claire mentions she has an idiot and a lunatic in her class. Of course, one of them is Balak, and Daniel agrees saying, Balak's skills are good. And mentions Henneth and Rudd. They recognize Henneth's name, but not Rudd's. They ask if he's sure it's the right student, because he barely passed. And Daniel says that he's probably the strongest of all the first years. Arthur asks Claire for her opinion, and she mentions that he's a nice student and that she wants him in her class. This surprises the rest, because she usually doesn't give compliments. She tells them about Rudd and Wilhelm's fight in the hallway, and they ask about Rudd's martial skills. Daniel tells them that his real talent is in weaponry, and we see Claire and Daniel argue about whose disciple he will be. Arthur breaks the table, and asks if that's how teachers should behave, and asks Damien what his opinion is, and Damien says nobody would want a scary guy like him to be their professor. Arthur mentions how Rudd is from a place called Dissol, and we learn it has a tragic history. A single dragon wiped out a country, and we learn that Daniel's master was the one who killed the dragon. They are surprised there is a survivor, and wonder if he's looking for revenge. Arthur acknowledges everything Daniel says about Rudd being talented, but says that he has a monster of his own. We see everyone training in the weight room, and Henneth and Rudd leave to grab drinks. They end up meeting the girl that Arthur mentioned. Her name is Leon Creer, and she's someone who is just as talented as his brother. She showed Rudd in his previous life that some walls couldn't be surpassed. Rudd gets angry thinking about it, and how she died before he could get revenge, and yells at her to move out of the way. Leon throws her can at him, and while Rudd dodges, closes the gap and kicks toward his head. He blocks it, to her surprise, and kicks at his head again, but he dodges this kick too. Henneth yells, asking what they are doing, and we see Leon is cautious of him because he dodged her attacks. She asks him if he's picking a fight because she enrolled with a recommendation, and he tells her she's just blocking their path. And he's thirsty. She awkwardly scoots out of the way, and tells him she misunderstood, and asks his name. Once he tells her, she says she will remember it, and walks away. Henneth asks if he's hurt, and he asks her if she didn't see him blocking the attacks. She yells, "Block it? I think you just broke your wrist," and to go to the infirmary. Back in class, Claire asks him what happened, and Henneth says he was beaten up. Rudd tries to correct her, and Henneth describes her appearance. The teachers recognize who Leon is. Claire gets angry, but Daniel tells her to control her temper, and if they send a formal complaint, and after they can punish Leon, with volunteer work, supplementary classes, etc. We see Rudd thinking it's embarrassing, and Claire and Daniel smiling. 3 days after, we see they are holding a combined sparring lecture. Each student will be assigned a number, and can choose their opponent. But nobody can be the same opponent twice. This way, there are only 2 matches total for each student. We learn that all the professors are watching and evaluating the students, and that it's more of an evaluation test than a sparring test. We see Henneth is called up, and she says everyone will be useless in front of a real genius, and Balak and Rudd joke with her. Rudd comments on how she picked a swordsman, despite the fact she's a mage. We see the announcer tell them to get ready, and Henneth starts by casting some fireballs, but her opponent easily blocks them. While she throws them at him, he closes the gap by dodging, but she blocks his vision for a second, and once the smoke fades he's greeted with hella fire arrows. He begins to deflect them, and begins to prepare for her next magic, but Henneth says gotcha, and we see she puts a dagger to his throat. He admits his defeat, and Henneth looks at Lana Chernica for approval, and happily walks off stage. Rudd asks why she fought a swordsman, and she explains that she understood how he would think a magician would fight. And we see the teachers praising her. We see Rudd is called out by Wilhelm, the kid he beat up in the hallway. Rudd decides to honor him by beating him up. We hear the sounds of them fighting, and Wilhelm surrenders. Rudd chooses Balak, and Balak looks nervous and tells him he doesn't want to fight him. And that Asteros doesn't fight their friends. Rudd says Balak is strong, and describes how much strength he has, but it won't be enough and that he has to reach perfection. And he's already learned a lot from him, and now it's his turn. We see the fight begin. It cuts to a flashback of Balak meeting Rudd in his past life, and Rudd started a fight and loses, but Balak acknowledges his strength. Rudd says because he got beaten up by Balak and Leon, he's realized that he's not very talented. Balak charges toward him, but Rudd dodges his punch and hits him instead. They continue this exchange of blows, while Rudd dodges, but Balak remains being hit. But Rudd realizes he's not doing damage to Balak. We learn that everyone in the Steros family admires muscles, and their muscles have fused with mana to make their skin their armor. Rudd realizes normal attacks won't work, and Balak recognizes his attacks are becoming faster, and harder to read. But doesn't think he can pierce his skin, so takes a blow from Rudd, but it ends up hurting him. We learn that Rudd went from short decisive blows, to thrusting attacks instead, and he plans to break the armor from the inside. Balak recognizes Rudd's technique, and thinks it's a counter to the Steros style. But he decides right now isn't the time to worry about it, and that he just wants to beat Rudd. Rudd continues his attacks, and Balak is adjusting to his speed, preparing to catch him. Their fists collide, and they both let out a barrage of punches while colliding. Balak recognizes that Rudd's strength comes from his combat sense, and that his stamina is worse. So he decides to end it with his next attack. He sees Rudd is not planning to dodge it, and Rudd tells him it was a good match. He draws his sword and we see Balak's fist go straight toward it. We see Balak fall to the floor, and everyone is surprised. All of the teachers wonder if it truly was a battle between students. And Claire mentions how he didn't even try his best, but he's already at the level of a high-ranking swordsman. Daniel tells her even the swing at the end was perfect. Daniel thinks about how Rudd's swordsmanship was like his master's, Ain Bryce, which made the heavenly sword style, and he never thought anyone could be Leon's talent, but how Rudd is a monster. And all of the teachers yearn to teach Rudd. It cuts to the cafeteria, and Henneth is mad at Rudd and Balak for always eating in the cafeteria, and not outside. Balak says the outside food lacks protein, and Rudd just tells her he's broke. Rudd jokingly asks her if money is paper to her, and she says, "Money is paper, though?" And he remembers her family is wealthy, but so is Balak's. We see two of the guild masters approach their table, and they introduce themselves. Rudd mentions how he didn't meet them in his past life, and how they died when he became a dragon slayer. The guild master of the Clouded Moon tells him he would live to give him an offer, and asks him to join his guild after he graduates. But Rudd tells them recruiting like this isn't allowed, and the guild master tells him that he's someone with great talent, so he needs a bigger stage to show it off. He tells them he hasn't picked a guild yet, but he has a counteroffer. And he asks him to find his brother. The guild master asks what does he get out of that, and Rudd tells him a good relationship with him. The guild master thinks about it, and agrees while saying he hopes they can develop further, and Rudd says he does too. After they leave, Henneth asks them if they've looked at their letters from the professors, which holds their evaluation from the sparring match. Henneth and Balak both read their letters, and when Rudd opens his he is surprised. Henneth looks at it and all we see are the signatures of the professors. Rudd goes into the professor's room, and we learn that when a professor signs a student's note it means they want to teach the student personally. Claire and Damien tell him that it's rare, but it shows he has potential, and not to worry because all of the professors are experts. It then shows all of the teachers, and their titles. Rudd decides to go with Daniel, but he wants to be his direct disciple. Which shocks everyone. Daniel asks if he knows what it means to be a direct disciple, and Rudd explains how there's no current successor to carry forward his technique. And he explains how the sky-piercing technique is only taught to the heir of each generation, and in his past life, his brother was Daniel's direct disciple, and thus the heir. Daniel asks why he wants it, and Rudd says he wants power, and because of him being weak, everyone he cared for died. And that if he was stronger he might have saved them. And he doesn't want to see his loved ones die again. This makes Daniel think of his past, and how he lost his sister, and he agrees to accept him, and suggests that every teacher can co-teach Rudd. This shocks Rudd, and he tells them that learning from just one professor is already hard, and that it'll be unfair to others. Arthur explains that in order to wipe out the dragons they need a great dragon slayer, and if this creates one, it doesn't matter if it's unfair. Rudd thinks to himself and wonders how someone so strict can easily decide on something that may become an issue in the future. The teachers all agree, and Daniel reminds Rudd it's all up to him if he will accept or not. Rudd anxiously wonders if someone else's opportunity will disappear because of his choice, and that it will heavily impact the future. He realizes he must become the knight who will stop the disasters, and agrees. And in order for that goal, he has to surpass his limits, and become stronger regardless of the cost. And he will become the knight the world needs. We see an injured Leon, and it cuts to a flashback of Claire giving her supplementary lecture on self-control. Claire tells her not to zone out, then charges at her, telling her it'll be troublesome if she died. It cuts back to the present, and we see Leon is upset with Rudd for snitching on her. She sits down on some stairs, and begins crying. Rudd sees this, and is shocked to see someone who he thought was cold, would be showing emotion. He mentions how in his previous life, she was cheerful until her adoptive mother died. Rudd knows he wasn't the one that snitched on her, but he feels like he's at fault. He decides to approach her, and Leon yells at him for snitching. He apologizes, and hands her a handkerchief. This surprises her, and he says he's sorry for being rude, and he took it too far. And he also clears up the misunderstanding of him snitching. She blows her nose, and asks if such things will relieve her anger, and accepts his apology, but says she won't let it slide if annoys her again. And he tells her that he'll avoid her. She turns around and tells him greetings are fine, and this confuses Rudd, so she repeats herself. And he mentions how he's never seen her act like this before. We see her walking away, and she mentions how doing something new doesn't mean she'll make friends, and Rudd asks her what she said. This startles her, and she asks why he's following her, and he explains he's going in the same direction. And they both realize they are going to the same training hall. This shocks Rudd, and he opens the door. He asks Daniel if she's going to be learning with him, and he says yes. This surprises Rudd because in his previous life, Claire was Leon's advisor, and now her grappling skills will be weakened. He mentions to her that she should learn them, and she says she's surprised he was observing her. He goes to curse, and she makes a joke about how she could snitch too. She asks him what he was trying to say, and Rudd explains he thought she would choose Claire's nomination rather than Daniel's, and we learn that Claire didn't nominate her, and that she dislikes Claire. Rudd mentions how in his past, Leon and Claire were super close, but now he's the problem that caused them to dislike each other. Daniel tells them they can talk about it after class, and he begins by explaining how the stages of swordsmanship are profound, and that they need experience, and the best way they can gain that experience is through sparring lectures. And Rudd realizes he wants them to learn while beating them up. It cuts to Leon and Rudd on the floor after training, and he curses again, and she asks why he curses so much. He asks her if she isn't angry about getting beaten up, and she says not really, because they lost due to them being weak. And that compared to Claire, Daniel's teachings are much easier. Rudd realizes it's his fault, and tries to change the topic, and she catches on that he feels guilty about it, and asks him to teach her grappling techniques. She gives him the puppy dog eyes, and he agrees, and he leaves. We learn that in order to prevent students from being dissatisfied with their accommodation, they are allowed to visit the capital during weekends and holidays. We see that Henneth went shopping with Rudd and Balak, and they complain about carrying her luggage. So she offers to treat them to some food. We see some of the restaurant staff greet Henneth, and guide them to their seats. Rudd wonders how Balak and Henneth are so calm, because it's his first time at such a place. She orders their meals, and Rudd realizes how expensive the meals are, but Henneth says she'll order anything he wants. When Balak tells her what he wants, she tells him to shut up. He tells her he carried luggage, and she tells him to shut up again. We see the table full of food, and Balak begins to compliment the food, and Henneth tells him to shut up again. But she asks Rudd if he likes his food. And she tells him to eat different foods. Rudd mentions how Henneth is overly kind to him for some reason, and how they used to be frenemies in his past life. It shows her yelling at him, and Rudd yells back at her for interrupting his meal, and he calls her a dog. She continues to yell at him, and he prefers the way she used to act. He goes to mention it, and she cuts him off by yelling at Balak, and threatening him, and asks if his brain is smooth, and continues to threaten him. She remembers Rudd was asking her something, and asks Rudd what he was saying. He tells her it was nothing, and thanks her for enjoying the meal. And after getting a taste of the old Henneth again, he realizes her being nice is better. Rudd notices the clock is at 8, and he remembers he was meant to meet Leon at 8 for training. It cuts to Leon waiting for Rudd, and wondering why he's late, and she mentions how Rudd is the first friend she can talk to, but unlike her, he has a lot of friends, so he might have forgotten about the promise. We see Rudd walk into the training room, and is surprised she's already there. She tells him he's late, and he apologizes. She asks him if he ate before coming, and he tells her yeah, he ate in the capital. She asks if it was outside the academy, and he says yeah, a friend bought him a meal. And she curiously says she sees. Rudd says they should start with simple footwork, and she mentions how she's never been out of the academy, and she anxiously stands there. And she says they should start. Rudd tells her next Saturday, they can go see the capital. She is excited, and asks really, and he asks her if she's that happy. And she says, not really, since he asked, and he jokingly asks if they should just stay, and she quickly says she'll go. He says alright, and tells her to do some warm-ups, and she bombards him with questions about the capital. She asks him a couple more questions, and he hits her in the face with her gloves. And he asks her if she is usually this talkative. And she mentions that her mother often teased her for being talkative. He can't believe she's this talkative, and wonders how she managed to keep it in. He begins by explaining how he'll be using the stero style of grappling, and how the style is based on physical appearance. And due to that, he can only teach her some technical forms. and mentions how since Claire uses grappling arts, but has no fixed form, the only way to deal with her is to get hit less, and hit her more. Leon mentions how it's easier said than done, and asks how she's meant to do that. And Rudd tells her that's what he's teaching her, and demonstrates some footwork. And she can't read his movement, and compares it to a snake. He tells her it's called snake walk, and when she asks if it's a Steros technique, he says, no, and that he made it himself, because they don't use things like this. She calls him a genius, and he tells her to try it. She does a good attempt, and he comments how people like her are geniuses, not him. And how it took him 2 years to develop it, and 2 more years to master it, but she's the genius because she caught up in 4 minutes. She asks how it is, and he trips her and tells her it's a mess. He tells her if she's going to learn, she has to do it properly, and he'll work her till she's dead. They continue training, and it cuts to Rudd in bed thinking about how everyone is going well so far, and how things are similar to his past life. Except his relationships are a lot different than he expected, and how he doesn't know how it'll affect the future. And if he doesn't want anyone to die, it can't be the same as before. And if he can gather everyone and wipe out the 7th dragon, he'll probably see the guy who regressed him again. And for that to happen, he needs to play his older brother's role. The first thing he must learn is the sky-piercing technique. It shows Daniel and Rudd practicing, exchanging blows with their wooden swords. Rudd comments that he's playful, and we see Daniel swap his style, which confuses Rudd. Daniel punches toward him, but Rudd blocks it, and says aren't they meant only to use swords? Daniel says he tends to be whimsical, and we see Rudd create distance. Daniel says he'll play along, and we see Rudd launch an attack and knocks Daniel's weapons out of his hands, then counters. We see Daniel catches his sword, and compliments him. Daniel tells him it looks like he can start with proper training now, and that the sky-piercing technique isn't just swordsmanship, but also a mana management technique. He explains that people tend to gather mana in their hearts, but the sky technique is different, and how it uses external mana uniquely, as they have a mana imprint that allows them to gather mana into a subspace, and they use this to enable the heart to be a channel, rather than holding mana itself. He asks Rudd where he wants the imprint, and Rudd gets him to put it on the back of his hand. We see his hand glows, and he can begin to feel the mana surrounding him. When he looks up, he realizes he's inside of the subspace, and how everything is made out of mana. He hears a voice saying, "So it's you, little child." He wakes back up. Daniel asks how it was, and Rudd says it was great. Daniel explains that he'll need a while before he can adapt to feeling mana, and as he looks over, he is shocked to see Rudd gathering mana. Rudd says that the stages of the sky-piercing technique are represented by the number of wings someone possesses. Daniel has 6, and his master and his brother both had 7. And Rudd only has 1. It cuts to Daniel explaining that the imprint is engraved on the soul, not the body. And even if the successor dies, the memories of his life will be restored, and Rudd thinks there were only 2 consciousnesses in the heavenly spirit beside himself. Daniel, and his master. But since it's soul bond, there may be traces of his brother still in there, and how his master's explanation didn't cover if someone was trapped in another dimension, and now his only clue is the Void Dragon. We see Henneth asking why he's late, and she asks Rudd how his lectures were, and Rudd recounts his experiences with the professors, and we see all of the professors giving him compliments. Except for Damien, who doesn't say anything at all, and just offers him tea. Damien asks if he likes the tea, and when Rudd says it smells good, he says it's a relief, because he enjoys the tea too. He tells Henneth and Balak this, and Henneth says no fun, and Rudd asks how their lectures went. Balak says Claire is respectable, and Henneth is angry that her lecturer said fire magic was inefficient. Balak says, "Aren't flame magicians rare?" And Henneth yells at him. As they are talking, Jeremy Duvall approaches them, and asks if he's arguing with Henneth. Rudd asks if he's researched them, and Duvall says there's no way he wouldn't have, because they are both famous. Especially Rudd, because all of the lecturers chose him. And asks Rudd if he's interested in the student council. Rudd gets angry and says he doesn't like being someone's limbs, and Duvall says don't be so strict, it's not like he'll be treated like a mercenary. This angers Rudd further, and Duvall says he must have hit a nerve, and how Rudd's scars are only present on mercenaries. Rudd says he's being noisy, and Duvall replies that his hobby is playing detective, and he knows he's looking for his brother. Rudd explains how in his past life, Duvall was known as decision maker in his past life, and that he's extremely selfish, and self-righteous in making decisions for the majority. Rudd says he doesn't enjoy playing detective, but he knows that Duville is paying too much attention to others, and how he manipulates others, while walking away. Duville says he's interested in Rudd, and Rudd says he isn't interested in him. Kenneth apologizes to Duville, and he says he doesn't mind, and apologizes for disturbing their studies, and leaves. When he sits back down, he sees a letter in his book that says, "Be careful of Damien," and we learn that in Rudd's past life, that how Duville is the real danger, and how he sacrificed countless people, and how Damien was the first to die among the teachers, and was Duville's first sacrifice. It cuts to Rudd inside of a carriage, but he mentions how Duville didn't kill Damien, because Damien killed himself. But it was Duville who convinced Damien to do it. He did it because he thought Damien was a threat. And he has to stop it from happening this time. Leon interrupts him by complaining that he's always late, and that he should be 10 minutes early. They get off and begin walking through town, and she asks where they should go. And they decide to go buy clothes, and she grabs his hand and runs off. She tries on a dress, and tells Rudd it's his turn, and hands him some formal clothes. While he's trying the clothes on, she thinks that he's strange, because, at first, he showed her random hostility, but after seeing her cry, he is nice to her. And she mentions how his initial feelings were genuine, and it's like he's mistaking her for someone else. And she sees him in formal clothing, and wonders who it is that he hates so much, but looks up to as well, and we see both of their past lives. Rudd asks what she's staring at, and quickly buy the clothing. She jokingly says she shouldn't have bought anything, and we see Rudd is excited. She looks at him and thinks he looks good, and when he asks why she's staring, she mentions that she was going to pay for lunch, and he says, he isn't shameless, and she just bought him clothes. She asks about his mercenary past, and if he had companions he fought with. And she says they must be as close as family, and wonders if he had a first love among them. She wonders if it was too sudden, but then Rudd starts screaming about how they treated him like shit, and he says he can't believe she's asking all of this. Leon says she's never seen anyone like him, and how his personality can flip instantly, and how one minute he's always cursing, and the next minute he's honest and teaching her. Even now, he's looking for where to go, and she calls him an ill-tempered pushover. He begins to walk away, and she says her mother says that friends support each other. She says they should visit her house, and she'll introduce him to her family. It shows them leaving a warp gate that took them to Siren City, inside of Liberal Kingdom. Rudd asks if she knows this is against rules, and she says it's okay if they don't get caught. It shows where the city is on the map, and how it's a fancy city, and in a few years, the city will be destroyed by the 7 dragons. And that the Dragon Annihilation Troop was also wiped out, which is the group Leon's mother runs. She shows him her house, and she calls out to a man trimming the hedges. And tells him she brought a friend, and he is shocked, and begins crying, telling everyone she finally brought a friend home. They walk into the house, and everyone inside greets them. Rudd mentions that even though it's his first time seeing the members, they give him a familiar atmosphere. And now he can understand how her personality shifted so much in his past life. She takes Rudd to a room, and inside we see her mother, Adeline, and the White Flame Guildmaster Liana. She hugs her mom, and her mother mentions how she heard she beat someone up, and Leon introduces her to Rudd. This surprises her mother, and her mother thanks Rudd for being friends with Leon. She mentions how Leon is very sensitive to other people's emotions, but that she's bad at expressing herself. And mentions how she heard she broke a classmate's wrist. Leon tells her it was Rudd, and this shocks her, and she yells at Leon, scolding her. She tells Leon to apologize, and Leon apologizes for hitting Rudd. Adeline says she told her to be careful with normal students, and Liana says she doesn't know about that. She explains how Rudd treated Balak like a toy, and how Abel wanted to recruit him, which surprises Adeline. Adeline looks excited, and says that she has to see herself how strong he is, and asks if he'll show her his skills. Rudd realizes it's a good chance to fight an active top-level dragon slayer and realizes there's no reason to refuse and agrees. We see everyone gathered around to watch the fight, and Leon says she's sorry if he finds it bothersome that her mom wants to spar him, and he says it's a good opportunity. She tells him not to die, and whispers to her mother to take it easy on him. Adeline says that they'll only use mana inside their body, and to avoid vital areas, and if he can land a blow on her, then it'll be his victory, and she'll grant him a wish. She asks if it sounds good, and he agrees. They clash swords against each other, and this repeats again. Adeline jumps into the air, and swipes down. Rudd dodges, and the troop members are shocked that he's taking her attacks. Adeline says it's surprising for a boy his age to be so refined, and it's a shame his body can't handle it. We see her stab toward his chest, but he blocks it, and she follows up, which forces him backward. She asks if he's tired, and he uses the sky-piercing technique to send mana toward her. She repels it and sends him flying, which breaks his sword. She recognizes the technique, and is surprised Daniel took a disciple in. Leon is baffled by how strong Rudd is, and can't believe her mother is having fun sparring him, and wonders what the feeling in her chest is. Rudd says he's won the match. Adeline is confused, but he explains she used mana outside her body. And she realizes her mistake now. Rudd says he hopes she doesn't go back on her words, and he tells her his wish is just to spar with her again, with the same rules. It cuts to them trading blows with each other, and she opens a gap in her defense, which Rudd takes advantage of, and dodges his attack, and begins a counterattack. But she realizes he has no gap, and is shocked by how fast Rudd's reaction time is, and how it's something she thought only Leon had. We learn that Rudd is using mana to constantly push his senses to the limit, and how in the past, he wanted to beat Leon with this. We see him preparing for a lunge attack, but she blocks it. He jumps behind her and strikes, but she dodges. She swings back, and he dodges. They exchange blows, and Leon yells that she told her to take it easy. She asks if he's going to keep running, and he continues to block her attacks. She gets angry and rushes in, and he pulls his sword back and thrusts it at her, but lets the sword go. She kicks it away, and he leaps toward her. She realizes that she needs to create distance, but he's disappeared, and she sees him behind her, wondering how he got there. He uses a Steros technique, and throws a punch toward her face. We see him sent flying back, after she kicked him. Leon runs over and calls Rudd crazy, and asks why he's trying so hard. He tells her he didn't lose, and Adeline admits her loss. She says she'll uphold her promise, and he tells her just to promise one thing. That she needs to believe what he will say one day. She says she'll keep her promise, and says she'll look forward to working with him, and calls him son-in-law. It cuts to Rudd and Leon in a wagon, and he's thinking about how now he has a connection to the troop, and he won't let anyone die, and maybe Leon's future will change too. We see her awkwardly humming, and he asks why she's being so awkward over a joke, and she says she isn't worried about that, but her mother is interested in him. We see them walking back to their dorms, and he asks why she's following him, and she explains she's escorting him. Because of all of these weird rumors, like a pervert training at the entrance at night without his clothes on. We see Balak in the background training almost naked, and she says another rumor was a blonde homeless girl roaming the flower field. Rudd asks for more info about that, and it cuts to Rudd meeting a teacher named Lillian Stout. Rudd asks about a student named Linnea Selket, and Lillian loses her shit, and goes postal on her office, screaming and yelling while looking stressed. 5 minutes later, she apologizes for all of that, and explains how Linnea is talented, and she's sure she'll become unparalleled in the future, but that she's too obsessed with freedom. And explains some of the wild things Linnea has done, because of her obsession. Rudd remembers his brother saying getting Linnea to graduate was harder than all of the training he's ever been through, and Rudd thought he was just exaggerating, and his brother says she isn't like a person. Lillian asks for his help, so she can avoid her being expelled, and how Linnea likes words of praise. And from someone like Rudd, she might listen to him. It cuts to Linnea lying down in the grass, talking about the weather being nice. It cuts again to her being asleep, and Rudd waking her up, but she ignores him, so he pushes her down the hill, which wakes her up. He asks her what she's doing so early, and she says she was watching the flowers, and asks who he is. He introduces himself, and he tells her he admires her. She asks if it's because she looks cool, and if he wants to be friends. He begins to ask how her academy life is, and she ignores him and chases a butterfly. He curses at her. He sits her down and explains how he's heard she's been skipping classes, and making messes, and it'll make him sad if she fails. She wonders if she really made a mess, and he mentions the drill hall, to which she says nobody was injured. He says, putting that aside, she has to graduate. She asks why, and says that this place is warm and full of flowers, and her hometown was just nothing but snow. She says she wants to live here forever, and he asks if she understands what the academy is for, and that dragons are killing people all the time. And she says, humans are killing dragons too, and what's important to her is having a peaceful life. Rud asks if she really thinks humans and dragons are the same, and she says to her they are, and how are they different? Rud explains how she wouldn't understand how other empires are constantly being devastated, and humans are being endlessly slaughtered on the daily. And places without dragon slayers can be wiped out even by a baby dragon. He asks if she's seen her family and friends eaten in front of her, and she wonders why he's getting angry at her. He says he'd rather talk to a wall, and he didn't expect her to be so ignorant. He tells her to enjoy her peaceful life until she dies, while everyone is risking their lives to save her. She calls out for her dad, and we see an ice crystal saying, "Yes, my child." She asks her dad what to do, because she wants to be his friend. And her dad tells her don't worry, friendship is built on quarrels, and she says okay, and she'll apologize tomorrow, and her dad says good, and he'll talk to him tomorrow too. And we learn he is the Spirit King Feldroa. We see Rud is angry at himself because of his short temper, and how it's understandable why she cannot empathize with the humans or dragons, and how he just vented his anger onto a child. And how his brother succeeded because he was kind, and he wonders what he should do. We see Henneth yelling at Leon, and how she's crazy for coming there, even after breaking someone's wrist during their first meeting. Henneth tells her to get lost. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.